Welcome to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Thiard. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
So today on the Disrupt Your Career podcast, we're delighted to have with us Anna van der Horst, who is based in the Netherlands, just outside Amsterdam. She has an interesting juggle of activities. She's doing research in the university field around self-management of career and organizational management of careers. So that's very much overlapping with the kinds of thinking and work that we do. She's also a member of a rather innovative company called eelloo, which she will tell us more about later. And she's also a new mother, so she's permanently juggling. And we are just delighted that she's made time to come and talk to us today and to bring a young researcher's viewpoint to the discussion that we're engaging in at all stages. So Anna, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, we're delighted. Let's start, as we usually do, with hearing a little bit about your own career story. We're interested really in the fact that you've so clearly had a very strong focus from the beginning on psychology and specifically organizational psychology. Tell us a bit about how you were drawn in this direction and how you have used what you've done to create the different mixes of work that you get engaged in now.
Sure. How did I get involved? When I was very young, I always wanted to become a children's book writer. And in a way, I ended up writing a lot, but to a different audience and about a different topic, about people and their careers and what makes work and their work life interesting to them. So there is some overlap, but I think my real love for psychology and for this organizational field started with my mother, who's been a big inspiration to me. She started her own consultancy company before I was born. And around the 90s, early 90s, her company started to grow a lot and she loved doing her job. So I always had this woman around me who worked with a lot of passion, but at the same time, she really hated being a manager. So she said, I want this company organized in a different way, in a way where people can be responsible for their own work and I don't have to be anybody's manager. So from a really young age, I was confronted with that you can organize companies in a non-hierarchical way, in a different way, which sort of made me open-minded from the start towards how people can work. So I think that's where my first interest started. And then I always knew I wanted to study psychology. And I thought I wanted to be a selection psychologist. So that's the first job I went for. Straight from the first year, sort of started to specialize in that. And I really enjoyed that. I started doing that when I was 21 with a big international company in the Netherlands, Randstad they're called, and they had like a subsidiary with selection psychologists who did career management on selection. So I thought that was my big dream, but then I realized that I sort of got there a bit early. I was like, I can be a bit more ambitious here.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. And then I got very lucky from then on. I think I planned my career as well, but also just things happened and brought me in a certain direction. One of those things was that I got an assignment at PwC and they asked me to do a study on how I could make their selection process more inclusive, so more fair to all sorts of different cultures and backgrounds. And I just loved doing that. And then I asked if I could have time off of work to combine my work with doing a research master. And I loved doing that. And I met some very interesting people in the university that inspired me. And then I thought I want to do a PhD. And at the same time, the subsidiary within Randstad was bought by the company I work for now, eelloo. And that was a very lucky strike and a very good combination because right when I met that company or when I started there, they had a research department. They were excited about me wanting to do a PhD. And at the same time, they said, maybe this whole thing with managers and a hierarchy doesn't really work. And this is 10 years ago, almost, when I first joined them. Then I was still doing the research master. So it wasn't really a big hit back then. Now it's popular to talk about giving people more ownership and more ability to craft their own jobs. But at the time, it was quite new, but they really took an interest in it. So they made it possible for me to combine my research work with applied consultancy work within their company. And I think also I found good mentors to help me make that happen. I found a very flexible, very passionate professor who really looked together with me to what can we do, what is possible, how can you build your PhD around your job. And this is how it came about.
That's fascinating. And the fact that you weren't necessarily directed in the direction of research at the beginning, but it came about through a natural curiosity is wonderful, because there's purpose and serendipity in this path. And that's very interesting to us. Let's talk a little bit more about your PhD and some of the work you've done in it. You took a long look at the theory and application of career adaptability as a concept. Tell us more about what aspects of adaptability you chose to examine and why.
Yeah, there's a big body of research in career adaptability and a little bit less in career adaptive responses. So that's the real behavior that comes after the career adaptability is more the resource, so the ability to adapt. And then I also looked at what behavior comes from that. And what I really looked into was the company I work for. We always combine psychology and technology. So we try to make online programs or tools that companies can use so that you don't just reach one or two people or a small group of people only the bottom, but you can reach larger numbers of people with what you want to change. So I found that interesting, and how to make that work and how to apply that to this career adaptability concept. And I thought it was a very relevant concept. You see that it becomes so important that people not only are able to make a good match between their own qualities and talents and their work, but that they are able to keep doing this. And you also see that it becomes more and more difficult to do that successfully. Change gets faster and faster and more complex. So at the same time, you say people are more responsible for this themselves. And also at the same time, you say, but it's more difficult to do so. So I think companies are really looking for how can we arrange this in a successful way. So what I did is I tried to develop interventions that you can apply to large groups of people that teach them how to work or how to take control of their own careers in a way that the company can still support them while doing that.
Fantastic. And like us in your research, you talk about the 4 C's. We added a couple and turned our model into the 6 C's, but we're inspired by the same initial piece of thinking and research. So the 4 C's, for those who aren't familiar with the idea, are something we could call adaptive traits or skills grouped under, in your case, the titles of control, curiosity, concern, and confidence, which again show up in our 6C model in our book. What did you learn from the results of your experiment with the participants? You've told me some general points about how much more complex this gets every time. But tell me a little bit about whether you see the 4 C's being equally important in influencing somebody's career adaptability or agility. And is there any one of them that's a more significant driver?
Yeah, interesting. First of all, I really like that you added extra C's. Together with my professor, we just published a new article in Journal of Vocational Behavior that sort of combines the 4 C's from career adaptability and proactive theories. And there, what we do is say this career adaptability really focuses on the start, on the phase where people haven't made decisions yet, but are preparing for a decision. Then they make a decision and then they start doing things. Then they become more proactive. So we try to really combine these theories and make it more a full circle. And I think that's also what you're doing with the C's that you added, like the networking and the more social part of it, that really, I think, is in one line. So I love that you already tried to include those things in the theory, because I think they are important and relevant. And in my study, what we did is look all different types of people at the start of their career and more experienced people at different levels, highly educated or middle level. I tried to teach them in a scalable way to grow in their career adaptability. And we saw that is very much possible. So people at all these different levels, also if they've already invested in a career, if they've already got used to a certain job or a certain field of work, with not all that much input, they can still really learn what is important to steer their career more themselves. So that was a great outcome, because a lot of the career adaptability aspects sound like things you're either born with or not. The notion that you are responsible for your career, or self-efficacy, the feeling that you will be able to be successful in dealing with changes. Those are things that one person has more than the other, but still everybody to a certain point can get better at these things. So that's very nice. And also what we saw in the study that I found very interesting is we looked at certain personality aspects, and we looked at other personal or individual differences that have an influence on these 4Cs. So for instance, the older people get, the less they start showing 4Cs. And that's what we hear in organizations a lot as well, that it's more difficult to let people who are a bit at the end of their career be more proactive or stay proactive with thinking about the future. But what we also found was that things like general internal locus of control, so the belief that you are able to influence your own success or failure, that you're responsible for that, or an overall sense of curiosity, so that you like to learn or that you keep looking for new information, and also a more general belief in yourself, so a good idea about that you will be able to do things or learn things successfully. Those very general characteristics have an enormous positive impact on these 4Cs. So people who have an overall sense of control in their life also will be able to apply this to their jobs. And we saw that the whole effect of age disappears when you look at these characteristics. And on one hand, you could say, oh, so for some people it's way more difficult to do this self-management of careers than for others. But at the same time, these characteristics, this locus of control and this curiosity, this self-efficacy, is something, of course, one person has this more than the other. At the same time, you can really influence this by creating a certain culture within your organization. And what we do, or what we should realize even more, is that the way we organize work in a traditional way doesn't really help or promote these characteristics. So if you really tell someone, this is your job, this is your package of tasks that you need to do, stick to them, and we're going to control and check whether you've done them all right, and we're going to give you an appraisal once a year to see whether you've done what you've promised. Those things are not very helpful if you want people to learn and explore and take risks sometimes and try to do new things and try to come up with what really suits their own talent or what they're motivated about, also in the long term, what keeps them going, what keeps them enthusiastic. So I think the overall conclusion is that pretty much everybody can learn if you help them and show them what behavior helps them to manage their own career. And at the same time, you need to be really careful what kind of culture or what kind of surroundings you create for people to let these 4Cs grow and thrive for people.
Fascinating. That certainly aligns with a lot of what we've learned, both through our research and through our simple anecdotal storytelling from the different people that we've researched and whose stories we've told. Tell me a bit more about other ways that you think organizations do or should help or hinder career management. We see all kinds of different versions, but from a researcher's point of view and or from the clients you work with in eelloo, tell us about what you see as best practice and or the things to avoid.
Yes. What we've been working on a lot lately is that one of the most important things that make the difference between a successful project or a failing project is to not changing the way people deal with their careers project on the side with HR. So what we see is often someone would come to us and say, oh, we want people to be more employable, or we want people to take more proactive action around their careers. And with all of that, there's a lot of emphasis on personal agency, which is all a good start, but it won't work if you don't really integrate it in the way you work on a daily basis. So if you keep doing what you do, but you offer career guidance on the side, some people who are already interested might use it. Some people who really need it because they are having a big problem might use it, but you won't reach your entire company. And what does work, if you change the way people look at their jobs, and what we love to do and what we see is often very successful is when you let go of a job description that tells people this is what your responsibility is, but you make it much more open. You also had a podcast with, I don't know her name, but she wrote the Inside Gig book.
Edie Goldberg.
Yes. And she says this gig economy is becoming much more popular, and you should also maybe look at your own organization as not having people with set jobs, but as more flexible gigs, so that people can almost craft their own jobs. And that's what we've been doing a lot with companies, where we have created a system where they can really get an overview of what talents people have. So people can really show their own talent or show what they want to do, what their ambition is, what they are good at, what their added value is. And on the other side, we make it really visual, what jobs there are, what the company needs to do. And it's important that people are very aware of the common goal of the organization and they feel like that's what they're working towards as a team and not just as an individual with their own responsibilities only for their set job tasks. So what does work is really change your full HR cycle and make it about finding meaning in work, finding a good way to allocate talent to the right jobs that you have, make people work together as teams on challenges instead of giving them coaching on the side.
Fantastic. Yes. And I think the key certainly is around making this an integral part of anybody's career, not seeing it as a separate issue, not seeing it as something that's just about remedying poor performance or singling somebody out, but making it a normal and natural part and taking it away from the HR function. HR functions are wonderful, but people tend to view anything that's labeled with HR as something that might have a rather nasty smell or be associated with some kind of sanction or process or boring stuff. And if you can make it something that is just a natural part of everyone's life who works here, it takes on a very different proportion, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and then it also is not something that takes more effort to do, exactly. Because then it's not going to happen because everybody is busy.
Sure.
Then it's something that gives you something or that solves problems for you. And what I also like in this topic is the work of Sharon Parker. She did a lot of work on proactive behavior. Mm-hmm. And you can really translate that to why things work in organizations or why they don't. And she wrote a beautiful model about all the antecedents of proactivity. But the core of this model is that people only show proactivity towards anything, well, their work, but also towards their careers. First of all, people are able to do it, that they can do what they see or what they want to change in the future, that they have a reason to do it and that they are motivated to do. And if you translate that to what organizations need to facilitate, I think that is a helpful thing to look at. If you, first of all, make it possible. So make sure there is a way to know your talent, there is coaching available, or there is a way of working that facilitates these things. And also make sure people are dealt with in a positive way so they can develop believing in themselves and are not so scared to try out new things. The other one is the reason to. One, it needs to be really clear why it is important to take action towards your career, what the consequences are if you don't do it, if you stop learning or development, but also make it attractive and make it clear what they are working towards. And the energy one is the most difficult one to influence because you can't sort of tell people, be enthusiastic about this, be enthusiastic about trying new things in your career. But what you could do there is really change the culture, the way you talk about growth and development, and make it something that is in line with what people's intrinsic motivation shows. Make it something that's important to them instead of just to the company.
Fantastic. Yes, indeed. Now, one of the tools that we thought was fascinating that you've been developing is this tool that allows individuals to make themselves visible by writing their career story online and sharing that either internally or externally, I guess, wherever it's appropriate for that story to be known. We're obviously huge fans of stories. We use story as the basis for our thinking and for the wisdom that we derive from the work we do. And so anything that allows more people to tell and share and celebrate their stories is something that we're going to be fascinated by. Tell us more about why you created this tool and how it's turned out to be valuable, both for the individuals and organizations concerned.
Yes, this was a lovely project and I really like the outcome of it. It was based on Marcus Picas's career construction theory. He also came up with the 4C model for career adaptability. And he started career coaching within university settings and helping people at the start of their career to really find their own story and their own career path. And this really focuses on what makes work meaningful to people. So when do they really feel like something suits what is their personal identity or their personal being and what should be in line with that? What do they want to contribute to? And I looked into what he was doing on a one-to-one level. And again, we thought, it would be so powerful if we could make this available to more people at the same time. People really have the chance to not just look at their profile, which was okay for a long time. You could look at, what am I good at? What is my personality? And I find a job that suits that or matches that. But now you're not done when you did that. You really need more than that. You need your career story, or you need to know what direction really suits you, because once you've made that match, things have already changed again. So I think it's easier to hold yourself together in this quickly changing surroundings if you have a sense of that story, and it really can help you to give you direction. So what we did is we made an online program with these questions that Mark Savikas uses in this career construction interview technique, in the one-on-one coaching technique. And we made it a bit more light and fun to do. So you can make it as serious as you want, but we designed it so that people can add pictures and they can summarize their story. And in the end, you end up with like a Pinterest page of yourself and a big poster with a title underneath. So in a very visual and fun way, you can let your colleagues know not just who you are in your job you're doing now, but who you are as a whole person. And in that way, you can also maybe use the whole person a lot better by matching all these different qualities to the work that has to be done within an organization.
Wonderful. So that's one dimension of the sorts of work that you've done at eelloo. And I'd like to get into a little more detail about how this company works, because any of our listeners who don't speak Dutch are going to find that they might go and want to investigate who this company is and find that, like me, it's all in Dutch and they really can't make head or tail of it. But what I know from what you've already told me is that it is an experimental company. It existed, I think, for about 5 years or so. None of you have job descriptions. I mean, it sounds as though it was inspired, at least in part, by your mum's complaints a few years ago. No job descriptions, no definitions. You're a group of people doing work and also experimenting with the way you work and trying to draw wisdom from it. Tell us a bit more about how you do it and what sort of learnings and insight are coming from all of this.
Yeah, we exist a bit longer. We exist almost 27 years already.
Okay, forgive me. I can't remember why I thought that, but yeah.
Well, it's not surprising that you thought that, because about 5 years ago, we really started to even altogether decide who's earning what kind of money, instead of doing that through managers. So that was like the biggest step towards really working in a different way. But we started as one of the first online test distributors. So tests back in the days were like personality intelligence tests were done with pen and paper. We started doing that in a more online or a technical way. And from there, we've evolved to this company that now really focuses on how can you design work in such a way that it focuses on people and that it puts people first. Our goal is to change human resources in resources for humans. So we would say work is there for people, not the other way around. It wasn't like work was there first and then people came along. No, we've designed work. So we should be really aware of that. We try and design jobs in a way that they are good jobs and that they add value to people's lives and at all different levels in the labor market. So that's the goal for the company. And we said we want to do it ourselves. So we want to make our jobs suit ourselves and make them meaningful to us. So that's a good place to start. And about 10 years ago, we said we don't want to have this hierarchy anymore. We want to not let people be the boss of other people, but be the boss of work. So you can still take leadership. You can still be responsible for something or manage a project, but you manage and are responsible for the work and not for certain people. And it's your job then to say, oh, okay, I'll be the leader of this project. Who wants to join me? Who do I need? And who has time? Who is motivated to do this? And then you create a group of people that works on this and works on that. So we say we have a group of people, we have a group of work, and amongst each other, we match these together. And we did this for a while and then really saw taking away management or taking away hierarchy is not the only thing you need to do to make this successful. You need to put something else in place to make sure that people keep developing and that people feel supported, because I think we see that a lot in the different way we work now and ever-changing surroundings that we have, that it also puts more pressure on people. This freedom, it's nice that you are free to create your own job and you can have all these changes and choose your own path, but it's also difficult to know what path suits you or what is the right decision or how you can make yourself useful or how you can find your place somewhere. So we found that it is very important to structure this in a good way. And we said we want to create like a professional playing field. So what we designed is, we call it now the playground. And the playground is sort of a set of interventions that took over our HR system. So we no longer have the regular HR cycle, but we've put the playground in place instead. And every month we do something together that helps us organize the way we work. So for instance, 1 month you get help to really look into your profile, look into your talent, think about your future. The next month we come up with ways on how we divide the work and how we can do that in a way that people know what's going on and I can show other people what they are available for. And then the next month we focus more on, for instance, transcendence is something we find important. It sounds a bit strange, maybe what we mean to say with that it is important to also make space within the work that you do to think differently or to take distance and experience other things that might give you new ideas or give you new inspiration. So go to a museum with your colleagues or on your own, or go and look at a different company or do a different job for a while, or try out starting something for yourself on the side. And we try to make all those kind of things possible while you're working with us. So we gave a bit more structure and tried to really create a nice way that we can work together. And the last and most challenging step was changing performance appraisal. So we had all this free way of working where you could really craft your own job. But at the end of the line, there was still someone who was in a natural way a bit higher up in the company and decided to, like the owners of the company, decided who was earning what kind of money. And then we said, well, this is no longer in line with the way we work. So now what we did is at a certain point in the year, you can choose a few colleagues that have worked with you intensively and that have seen you do your job. And you basically write your own performance appraisal, or we don't call it that anymore. We call it our impact meeting. So it's more how you describe the impact that you have within the company. And we really try to focus the meeting on the future. So you don't have to prove whether you did what you promised the last year, but you can, of course, talk about the project that you were happy with or what you learned from them. And you can say what kind of impact you think you're having in the company and that you want to have in the company for the next year. And then together, everybody knows from everybody else what they're earning. And together we look at, well, how much money is there, who is earning what and who is doing what, and is that comparable or is that in line? And then should you grow in salary or not? So that was the most challenging last step, I think, in self-managing our company together.
It sounds terribly complex, but definitely very liberating.
I hope it doesn't, because it is, in a way, it's difficult because it's not been done before that often. So you really have to design together what your company should look like.
Absolutely. And I guess it will take time for you to perfect that particular aspect of the system, but it's a very interesting and rather lovely way of deciding how to allocate the resources around you and to be very transparent too. Let's shift the direction a little bit and talk about the students that you're either teaching or observing or that are around you in your academic work. And just to hear really what your observations are amongst them in terms of what are they thinking about in terms of their own careers, and how do those preoccupations seem to be either similar or different from those you had yourself when you were an undergraduate, or indeed others that you've studied or reflected on in any way?
Yeah, a nice question, because I think there is a big difference, and I see the topics that have grown in importance over the years. I think when I was still in university, we knew the world was going to change and we knew that things were going to be more flexible and different, but you were still aiming for a specific job. You were still thinking like, oh, this is going to be the company I'm going to work for, or this is the career path, the steps I'm going to take. And of course, there are still quite traditional career paths you can do, but they're less and less common. And I think also the new generation is less focused on them. They are really looking a lot more for a job that's going to make them ready for the next job somewhere else. And so the first job that they want to take is not so much at a company that's going to give them predictable career, but is somewhere where they can learn and gain the skills to be attractive in the labor market for someone else. And also what I find very different is that there is a lot more awareness around what impact they want to have and how they want their work to be meaningful and what they want to contribute. And in one way, that's wonderful, because if you at an early age start really thinking about what do my role in society, how do I want to have an impact, what really motivates me and what do I find important, it can help you to create a much more meaningful career. At the same time, it also puts a lot of pressure on them. So right from the start, they want a job that means something and they want a job that has an impact. But most jobs at the beginning of your career are a bit more simple or also sometimes a bit more boring. And you learn things, but maybe you don't see straight away that you've learned them. And what we talked about earlier is that where before, as long as you knew your profile and you found a good match, you were sort of there. Now, all of a sudden, you need an identity. And we were talking before about the storytelling program that we designed and how wonderful it is if you can help people be able to talk about their identity and find their path. But at the same time, it's also a big assignment to have an identity, especially when you're young or you don't know yet. So what it results in is a lot of burnout and a lot of stress for young people. So I think it's so much more important now than ever before that young people really helped at the start of their career to create a career story, to be able to tell their story, but also to be able to see it for what it is and also accept that it might become more and more important. It might grow over time. It doesn't all have to be there straight from the start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is certainly a very similar reflection to that we have both as consultants and coaches and researchers, but also as parents of student-age children.
Yes, do you recognize this?
Sensing them feeling more pressure than we did or you would have or anything else to be already in a perfectly curated career, which is mad when you're only 20. However many part-time jobs or summer jobs you've had, it's just not feasible to have a perfectly curated career at that point, is it?
No, you don't know yet. Yeah. You might never know. It just grows along with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a process, it's a journey, and however much you tell them that, they want it to be right here, right now, and all defined and wonderful.
And they feel that they fail if they don't have it. No, they feel like, I should be able to do this already. It's my responsibility, which is good that they have this sense of responsibility, but not if it creates too much pressure. Yeah.
Indeed. So finally, just taking our own moment to be looking forward into the future, not as students, but as people who reflect on these kinds of things. What's next for you? What plans do you have on your horizon, either in your academic work or in your commercial work? Tell me what's coming up on your horizon.
Lovely things, fortunately. At the moment, I'm working on a study to see what the effects of this career storytelling can be. Because we know that if you do this intensive one-on-one career storytelling, that people tend to become more proactive or more able to take action towards their career. But we also wanted to see if you make it scalable. So what we do is people do the career story online. They write their own story, but we see that a story really becomes alive when you share it. So we implement workshops or other interventions where people share their story with their colleagues or with their managers or with their entire company. And we want to know if this happens, does this have sort of the same effects? And we can already see in the data that people are able to make more decisions and that they take more action, and also that they start conversations more often with their management or with their mentors within their companies to talk about the future. So they really start being able to make plans. And earlier you asked me what C's have maybe more impact or would drive effects more, and we didn't even get to that. But what we see a lot is that planning and concern for the future, so that the notion that you are responsible and the ability to set goals and work towards them, we of course already know from psychology, from that theory of planned behavior, that this has a big impact. But we really see that this is what people find difficult to do, but what they can learn to do. So they often don't do it themselves already, which is different with curiosity, one of the other C's. They already like to look into their own talents or what they have to offer, or they already know how to look for vacancies or maybe even how to network a bit. But really plan ahead is almost impossible because the future changes all the time. But it still is important to set goals because that evokes proactivity or evokes action. And we can already really see that having this story to tell and having a clearer idea of who you are makes it much easier to set these goals and to take action. And what we also see is the most difficult thing to change is the self-efficacy. So the belief in yourself, but we are slowly starting to believe that maybe this is more of a trait and more of something that is with someone or not than a skill. But of course, it takes more effort or it takes more time to make people the belief in themselves, make that grow. And at first, I've gone away from your question a little bit. You said, what else is on the horizon? And so a study into all of this. And also what we are doing with companies right now and what we're working on technology-wise a lot is two things that I'm really enthusiastic about. One is to make the algorithms that match people in selection processes and also within companies themselves more fair and more inclusive. Because what we see is that the algorithms can work really well. They can sometimes really do maybe even better matches than the people themselves can, because they can use so much more data at the same time. They also are based on what has been done before. So what has been
they reinforce existing biases, don't they?
Exactly. So especially as a woman in the world of work, but also for many people with different backgrounds, it is so important that the companies are aware of this and that they feel the responsibility to use these algorithms in a responsible way and in a way that strengthens their workforce and makes it more diverse and more inclusive, and not do the other thing, not make it work against that. So yeah, what we're trying to do is come up with new innovative technologies that make this a good thing instead of a bad thing. And one of those things that is part of that is also make it easy to understand for people what an algorithm does. We often say, oh yeah, this match has been made by a computer and it works, but sometimes not even that difficult to say what parameters have been taken into account. And also we're doing a study right now where people can change their own parameters. So we say, hey, you are a woman who is doing all of these, or hey, you're selecting these vacancies and not these. And we often see that women, for instance, select vacancies with a shorter text. As long as when the vacancy has a lot of demands, they're all like, oh, maybe I'm not applicable for this. So we just give them back how they create their own biases, and we ask them, are you sure you want to do this? Or is this maybe something you've been doing without realizing and maybe you don't want to do it?
Yeah, fascinating. So some absolutely wonderful projects on the horizon and many reasons for us to stay speaking to each other, I think, and exploring the ways we can support each other and learn from each other and help each other. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Anna, having you with us here today and hearing all of these exciting things you're doing. And I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to be here and to be able to tell a story about my research and work. Thank you for
Fantastic.
that.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.